As you've probably seen in the news, used car values are going through the roof. And according to many financial gurus, expected to keep climbing throughout 2022 because there's inventory shortages. And this goes for both new and used. And you can drive by car lots in your neighborhood and see that the lots are empty, used cars and new cars. The cost of both new and used cars is expected to remain higher than average. Increased prices are attributed to high demand, and they're skyrocketing prices for new and used cars. Well, how does that affect you if you are leasing a vehicle and you're getting to the end of your lease? Well, there's some very important things that you want to keep in mind when you're thinking about what to do if your lease is coming to an end. First of all, if you don't buy out your vehicle, you have to find another car. And in this market, whether you look at a new car or a used car, the replacement might be much higher. You won't be able to get as good of a deal on it because new cars are sometimes priced over sticker price. You're lucky to get it for MSRP. And some used car values are now higher than they were brand new in the time when it was sold. So you probably have a significant financial opportunity that you're not even aware of. Your lease for a vehicle, whether it's through Toyota or Hyundai, even private leasing companies like US Bank, and we'll look at all these, or General Motors, has what's called a lease end buyout option, sometimes called a residual value. That dollar amount was set in your contract when you originally set up your lease. So when you leased your vehicle 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago, you had a buyout option set for you at the time you did that lease. And it's fixed. It can't change. Even if the value of that car went higher, the leasing company or the manufacturer is not allowed to change that buyout option. You're allowed to buy it for that contracted price, period, in most leases. So you now have a secret inventory vehicle option that you can take advantage of. Whether you want to keep your car or not, you want to look at that option because it could benefit you in a number of ways. So the other thing to keep in mind is if you buy your vehicle at the end of your lease and exercise that option, you do not have to pay any of the other penalties that might be in play. For example, if you have high mileage, there's a mileage penalty. If there's damage on the vehicle, you don't have to pay for the damage because you're buying the vehicle. Those charges that the lease company puts into the lease, excess mileage, excess wear and tear, damage, whatever those charges are, only apply if you turn the vehicle back into the leasing company. So if you do have high mileage or damage, be aware that this might be a good way to get out of those costs. Also, be careful about a trick that some dealers will use that is turn in versus trade in, right? If you trade in a vehicle, you get to keep the equity in the vehicle. For example, if your lease buyout option is $20,000 and right now your vehicle is worth $23,000, if you trade the vehicle in, that $3,000 gets applied to your new purchase. If you turn the vehicle in to the lease company, it's just, I'm walking away from it. I'm turning it in and I walk away. And if there's high mileage, you got to pay that. If there's damage, you got to pay that. But what happens is the dealership gets to keep the vehicle for that turn-in value. So they get to buy it for $20,000 versus $23,000. So what do you think they're going to try to suggest? Or what they're just going to do without your knowledge? So be aware there's a difference between a turn-in and a trade-in. You don't want to waste equity in your vehicle by just doing a turn-in if you could do a trade-in. And again, the difference is a turn-in is just, I'm walking away from my lease, here's the keys, here's the car, I'm done. A trade-in is, hey, you pay me what the vehicle is worth, $23,000, My buyout option is 20, deduct that, and the 3,000 equity I get to keep, or I put it towards my next car. Make sure you're aware of all your options. And to do that, you have to know what the value of your vehicle is. Now, what if you want to keep your car? If it's worth 23,000 and you have a buyout option for 20, just buy it for 20 and consider yourself ahead of the game. What if you don't need another car? This is an extra car. Well, that's where it gets a little tricky. But there is a way to do it. First, exercise your buyout option. Even if you don't want to keep the car or you don't need another car, just exercise the buyout option for $20,000. Then sell the car for 23 and pocket the difference in cash. Where can you sell it? Well, a lot of times the dealership will want to buy it, even if you're not buying another car from them. If it's not the dealership where you got it, maybe it's CarMax, maybe it's Carvana, maybe it's Drive, maybe it's Vroom, one of the other companies you see advertising all the time now that they'll buy a car without having to sell you one. Be aware that some leases have built into their contract a provision that if somebody else is going to pay off your car, you have to go through the dealer. If that's the case, then you just buy it and then resell it later. There's no restriction on that. Sometimes the lease company will try to pull a fast one and say, well, if you're going to sell it to somebody, you have to sell it to the dealership first or go through our process first. If you just buy out the car and forget about what you're going to do later, they don't have any control over that. Once you buy out the car, get the title, now you can go sell it somewhere else and pocket that difference. Be aware that you have to look at sales tax, because whatever you pay for the car as your buyout option, $20,000, let's say, if your state has a sales tax on used vehicles, you'll have to pay that. So if it's 6% sales tax on $20,000, that'll be $1,200. That you'll have to pay. And if the profit you would have made is not that much more, then it might not be worth doing. But if the vehicle's worth 23 or 24 or 25,000, paying $1,200 in taxes is worth keeping that equity. It's a little bit of a bureaucratic or administrative issue you have to deal with, but it is something that you could do. Now, how do these lease companies work? Well, each company has a lease end kit. It says just because your lease is coming to an end doesn't mean we have to say goodbye. It'll give you your options. Vehicle return checklist. If you want to return it, you have your vehicle inspected, schedule a turn-in appointment at your dealer. If you're turning it in, you have to go back to the dealer or a licensed dealer in that franchise. Clean your vehicle. Remove any garage door openers, any personal items. Keep copies of receipts for service because they're going to want to see those. Bring copies of your vehicle inspection report. Now, make sure that if you go to the dealer, you get a receipt for how the vehicle was turned in at the dealer. You don't want to find out later you're getting a bill for excess wear and tear because things weren't inspected at the time. Most of these dealer agreements or these lease agreements, we'll take a look at Toyota, has a provision about what is wear and tear, right? A RIP is excess wear and tear, where minor damage is not. Let's take a look. I think GM is the one that has a very good example of it. Here you go. Here's normal. Here's excess. Normal is, yeah, it's worn a little bit. Excess is a big hole. Normal is upholstery holes smaller than a 1/4 inch. Excess is bigger than a 1/4 inch. Every manufacturer is going to be a little different. You got a small little tear, you got a big rip, right? Same thing, normal, excess, and it could be mechanical as well. So look at your lease guide. You know, if you have a nick there, a scratch there, it's going to be okay. But if your vehicle is tore up, then it's not going to work. Again, they give you options. What if you want to keep the vehicle? What would you like to do at the end of your lease? Purchase your vehicle or lease or purchase a new Hyundai. You notice it didn't say turn it in, because 3-4 years ago when they were doing leases, they didn't want you to turn it in. They either wanted you to buy it or lease another one, because they were putting residual values and buyouts that were kind of high because that was their way of getting you into the new car. But now some of these lease residual values, turns out they're not that high after all. So purchasing your Hyundai, if they could redo this again, they would probably make it more likely you turn it in because they want the car back. Dealers and manufacturers have skyrocketing price, and their demand for cars is on the rise because they can't get cars at the dealership or at the manufacturer. So getting a lease turn-in would be a great thing for them. So don't waste your car by just giving it back to the dealership if you could make more use for the equity, or buy it yourself and drive it for another couple years. It's very unlikely you'd be able to buy that same car for the amount of your option in the open market. You probably would have to pay thousands more. Same thing. Hyundai has the same thing. Vehicle inspection, you'll have to do. Common questions. Should I set up an appointment to return my vehicle? Most times, yes. Can I return my car to a non-Hyundai dealer? No. You have to return your car to a dealer that's in the franchise if you're turning it in. But again, if you're trading it in, the other dealer might be able to pay off your car and then give you the equity. Some lease agreements make you bring it back to the same franchise dealer, but if that's the case, then just buy the car yourself and then trade it into another dealer afterwards. Lease options are a huge opportunity that a lot of times aren't being disclosed by the dealership because they want to keep your car, what they call glom onto your car. They want to swallow it up so that way you don't get the benefit of the equity. They get to buy a car cheap. So if you have a vehicle that's getting to the end of the lease, you can look at our website, leasequotes.com. You can get free quotations on what you might gain by buying your vehicle or keeping your vehicle versus just giving it back to the dealership and handing them on a silver platter a perfectly good, low mileage vehicle, one owner, that they can put on their front lot and sell. Another way to find out what your vehicle's worth, find a vehicle like yours for sale at a dealership. Find out, look what it's selling for, right? You may see that vehicle that has a buyout of $20,000 being sold for $29,000 at a dealership. Now, you're probably not going to get the full retail value because they have to make a profit, but you might get $24,000 or $25,000 if it's retailing for $29,000. So lease buyouts are affected dramatically by this used car explosion of value, explosion of price. Because when leases were being issued 2-3 years ago, they didn't count on this. They didn't think this was going to happen. Even some of the captive banks that don't sell cars, U.S. Bank has end of lease options. And it tells you how to return it. Your options are to buy it, turn it in. Doesn't matter where your lease is from. Look at what your residual value is. Look at that on the contract, residual value and buyout option. And see where you stand compared to the market. You very likely have thousands of dollars in unrealized equity that you could use to put cash in your pocket, buy the next vehicle, or buy a car for cheap, buy your own car for cheap. The dealer is probably not going to go out of their way to tell you about it. They're going to say, yep, lease end checklists. Give us your car, give us your keys, pay for the wear and tear, because they want your inventory. They're desperate. They're begging to put cars on their lot, and your car would be a perfect inventory for them. Don't give it to them without a fight. If they're going to get it from you, make them pay your equity.